I was born in Vietnam, in Con Tum. This is a central highland. Back then was the war. And then my dad was away from home, in the, let's say, the re-education camp. And I didn't know he was an artist. But I grew up and I remember he was a writer too, besides an artist. So he has a lot of manuscript of his short stories. And so I just take the manuscript and I drew, on the back of it. So actually I destroyed a lot of manuscript without knowing because I couldn't read at the time. And I remember I just drew tanks and airplane and shooting bullets, And I think that's how I guess my art career got started from before the first grade without knowing.
You study your art at the Ho Chi Minh City Fine Art University,
Yes.
and you complete your education in Los Angeles and New York, United States.
Yes.
And how do you compare those two experiences in two different countries?
Yes.
And how was that, contribute in the formation of yourself as an artist?
Wow, that's a big question. When I go to the University of Fine Arts here in Ho Chi Minh with the Saigon, and at first I didn't like the idea that I want to become an artist because my dad is a painter and he has a lot of friends, artists, and I saw them drinking all the time. And that was for me like not the idea of becoming an artist. So I didn't want to be one. But I have a friend and he's a really crazy about art. So he told me to go to the training class, to enter the university. And at the time I didn't know what to do. So I came with him for one day, just one night, drawing models. And after that one night, I just cannot stop. And that's how I got started. And when I want to enter the school, I asked my dad, Dad, should I enter the school? And he said no. And after I graduated, I asked him, why did you say no? And then he said, I have to say no because you have to make a decision. Yeah, being an artist, it's not like something you should take lightly. And so you need to make your own decision.
And what did you learn? How those experience, how you form your artistic, skill or your practice nowadays?
Oh, you are sharp. You go back to the question. Yes. So when I was in Vietnam, I only know painting and sculptures, and I specialize in sculpting. But when you go to UCLA, you realize that they have many things. And sometimes they even make things that the teacher doesn't know. They design their own courses. And then they come to the teacher and they say, I have this, can you follow it with me? And then you have to go to the administration and you say, I want to register this, to study this with this guy. And they look at it and they say, if you already have a sponsor from a teacher, then you can pursue this. And you make your own major. So for me, it's amazing, And then you realize that photography can be one, art, video can be art, film can be art. And basically now, if people ask me what is art, I don't know. Anything could be art, So it's quite amazing. And that's UCLA, and then New York. You go there and you realize that, there's a commercial side of it. Right. And so many things, that you don't quite understand. And you got graduated, and I saw that many of my friends, they got so busy with making a living. And that's totally against my idea of how to be an artist. You don't want to work 5 days a week, and then I have 2 days to make art. And that's not what I want. So I pack everything and then go back to LA. And just work for 3 days, for an artist, and then do my art. Okay. And now you can see all of the things that I got exposed to, now it's become my art. And I don't stop at just one material, but anything that can be the form to my ideas. And the idea is the material.
Well, just want to follow your journey though. So why here now, Vietnam, Saigon?
You know, after I got an invitation to go back to Vietnam from a friend, Trung Dai, to do a lecture at Sun Art in 1997, I think. And I just came back, you know, and I didn't expect anything. But then after the talk, I met a woman, and she, you know, became my wife.
Wow.
And then
Very
after
important.
that, yeah, I mean, it's just happened. And then, you know, after that, we're not together anymore. But I remember, like, the subsequent, you know, time that I came back, and when I flew out, you got emotional. You know, by the time that the airplane, you know, go to Da Nang and begin to make a departure, you know, into the ocean to go to Taiwan or Korea, you just feel some sensation in your body. And that's when I realized that, you know, something that you have to follow. And something you cannot deny is the emotion to a land. And in order to be happy, you have to follow that first, and then make your career later. And the body is very smart. It knows, you know, our mind is crazy. So it can, you know, override the body. But I trust my body a lot more now.
So you said you were trained as a sculptor, but
Yes.
your body of work is very eclectic. It's from with video, photography, performance, etc. So can you share with us the development of your work with the mediums?
Mediums. So just let's say the body of work is, I call Serpents Tails now. And now it's become a body of work that has sculptures, videos, and murals. And finally, this one. So it's become, you know, like a journey that I didn't realize that until a few months ago, when the National Museum of Taiwan, they asked me to propose something. And then I realized that, you know, all that connects. Because the first video, Waltz of the Machine Equestrian, if you look at the pictures, you know, it's like people, 27 people connected with raincoats and driving around. It's like a dance. And then it's like the skin. And then the second video, Serpent's Tail, you go underneath the skin into the tubes, you know. And then it's become the energy that pushing these riders forward. And I consider those riders are Sen Yang, because you are riding the same iron horse, right? The sack. And then you are carrying with you now not, you know, the iron weapon, the stick, but the phone, you know, and laptop. And then from head to toe, you have helmets, you have sunglasses, you have, you know, face
like
cover.
It's like an army gear, right?
It's like an army gear. It
Right.
looks exactly like that. It's
Okay.
amazingly, if you compare it to the armor of the knights before. And for me, you know, now all of us become Sen Yang. And that's when, you know, it became the idea of, you know, now we are fighting an enemy that is not from the outside, but we're creating it with pollution. So from the exhaust pipe, we have, you know, tubes that are coming out and become the serpents. And I use the idea of Saint George in Europe fighting the dragon,
Right.
and incorporate that into this Saint Yang, you know, in the Phúc Tân project in Sông Hồng. And that's like the first attempt, you know, to fight back the pollution, and it's changing like from the screen, right, into a public sculpture of metal cut out and painted. And then the last thing is Ekodi, which is, I think, the final attempt to send a message, around the world about protecting the environment. And I'm using a sentence that says, "Good traveler leave no traces." And this is the English one. Yeah, but in Vietnamese you have some really awesome one like "Phượt thủ ngầu không lưu dấu," or "Phượt thủ ngầu đi bằng đầu." It's very, very good. The beautiful thing about EcoD, this project is called EcoD, is it's gonna succeed because it's so easy to do. Because all of us walk, and if you propose something difficult, it's not gonna succeed because we're all lazy. But if you just say, you can change the world without doing anything, then it's possible. But if you ask people to do certain things, it's gonna be impossible. So, with this work, I think it's gonna be amazing when we have millions of them, and people wearing them, and walking on the beach, and you have these messages appears, and then after billions of time, it's gonna stick to your mind. And I think changes came from awareness.
I'm curious, how was that idea first conceived? The serpent tail.
So back then, after I make the video watch of the machine questions, and then I don't want to make another one about motorcycle, because Matrix, right? The movie, they make the first one very good, and the second one bad, and the third one so bad, And I don't want to be like the motorcycle guy. So when people ask me like, "Are you gonna make another video about motorcycles?" I say, "I don't think so." But then I'm
That's
thinking
very
about it.
smart.
I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I came back to my studio. I remember I have a Honda Future, and then I just out of curiosity, because you go on the street and you see the air, right, from the muffler, it's like go into your face or your leg, and you have this idea like, is this something that can pump things up? But that's just an idea. But the cool thing is, I think that's the eureka moment, is when you tie, rubber band with a plastic bag around, and you see that it's pumping up, very tight. And that's like, oh wow, I have this material. And I make another bigger one. And after 10 minutes, you got like a 3-meter tall, balloon. And I'm like, wow, I love this. And that's when I begin to make longer and longer, 40 meters, 50 meters. And it takes a little longer, but it's actually pumping things up. And in the video, Serpents Tails Morning, you got like a couple, and a girl and a boy, and they all have a backpack in the back. And I timed them. So the first girl got like only 59 seconds, and then her backpack got really full, and I cut it. I just leave the number underneath. And then the guy on the right-hand side, it takes about 5 minutes because his backpack is bigger. And then the couple, 6 minutes. And so that's like the first video I recorded as an experiment, like art experiment, and I call it a ritual. It's like, you go to work every day, right, in the morning. It's a ritual. And you don't go to work in 1 minute. You go to work in 20 minutes, 15 minutes. If you're lucky, 5 minutes. But when you ride a motorcycle, if you go 20 minutes, like that girl, you produce 20 bags of air.
Polluted air.
Yes, and it's visible because now you measured it. And so from that, I begin to venture into making a bigger video. It's like 15 minutes long, and it took me about 2 years to finish.
So the Technophobe was your first show at the Factory Contemporary Arts Center, where you use the mobile phone as a equipment to, the people can use it as a device to paint.
Yes.
And it produced a globally sourced doodle. So what do you think of the impact of the technology in art?
I think that project is groundbreaking, and even now with COVID-19, it's even better because you can go stay at home, open up your phone, use the app, and draw something in New York or London, and you don't have to step foot into the museum. And for me, like, I think artists, I always consider artists maybe a little different. Some people say artists is the people that doesn't know what to do. That's why they do art. But I think for me, as an artist, I consider them more like a Renaissance man, like in the vein of Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, which are the people I know first when I got to read things. And I remember the first book is Michelangelo that my mom bought for me. And so I always have that idea in mind. And that's why I told you the image of people drinking a lot, with my dad, I don't consider them my heroes because it's so against, my work ethic. It doesn't say I'm like great work ethic, but it's just like I think that artist is like, how Paul Newman said, you go into your studio 8 hours a day and you work just like a worker and you don't wait for inspiration. And when you work, inspiration comes. And of course, you have a notebook with tons of ideas already, but still you have to have let's say, a discipline. And in order to produce work on a bigger scale, I think you need that. You can't just like, well, I drink tonight, tomorrow I don't care, and then I can work whenever. It's very hard now to do that now.
So your projects usually span different continents. So in Time Boomerang, it's planned to set in different countries in 5 different continents, right?
Yes.
So do you typically plan what different countries there are in your initial planning process, or do you go as you go along?
I go with, it's like eureka moment is important. Because in the Thai Boomerang project, it started from the issue of Hoang Cha Chun Sai. So that's the conflict with the cow tongue. And when my dad told me about it, I'm really like, what the hell, like, how could a country like make a cow tongue, and claim all the South China Sea? And that's like sparks my interest. Because before, when I go to New York and I study, and as a Vietnamese, you grow up and you listen to your dad all the time. And your dad would always tell you about the problem with China, And China is something that every Vietnamese know. And so at some point I turn off that. I just like focus on like art, in New York, LA, I just study art. And I don't think like Hoang Cha Chun Sa have anything to do with my art, even though I'm passionate about it. But after I graduated from New York and I came back to LA, and for some reason I want to do something about that. And I think after 30 years of being brainwashed by my dad, it's sunk in, and then I want to do something about it. And to my surprise, it took me about 2 years to wrestle with it. I do painting, I do sculptures, and I try to do it, but I couldn't do it. And then I came back to Vietnam. I make those videos, the first video about motorcycle running. And then one day, in the process, I'm just like drinking with coffee with some friends. And they asked me like, oh, what do you want to do? What are you doing now? And I told them like, oh, I want to, measure Vietnam, from Cà Mau to the north, right, An Nam Quang. And all of a sudden, it's the idea. Like I will go from Cà Mau and I just do like this, all the way up, and it's a performance. But then I thought, why don't I just cast my hand like this in plaster, and I put it on a wheel, and I push it, so measuring a little faster, right? And then this thing, very interesting, happened. When I opened the mold, the first cast, one of the fingertips got broken. And I'm like, God, I did a bad thing. I broke the fingers. But then, for a moment, I realized that it's become a better thing. because now I can move this fingertip all the way, to that wall, and I cover that space. It's like it become a conceptual thing. It's even more beautiful, and then it changes everything, And I thought, I'm gonna bring that and then drop, in 5 corners of Vietnam, north, south, east, west, and maybe Hoang Sa, Cheung Sa. And I even tried to go on a boat, to Cheung Sa. But then, I thought about it for a moment and I realized that if I do that, when I go to an international art show, my friend from China, Indonesia, and Philippines can do the same thing to their country. Everybody drop fingertip around their country and say, I love my country more. And that would put us into the role of politician. So I don't want to do that. So I raise it up into a bigger scale. I bring it to 5 continents. And it became a story about conquest, colonial, and something bigger. And I want people to sit down like us here and we can talk about it in a more peaceful way and have a dialogue, in that sense. And that's how the work, just starting from this, and then it become around the country, and then it become the world.
Yeah, so it seems like you rely on that eureka moment, like spontaneous, go with the flow
I
process.
I think it's an amazing moment, because I think in creation, what you know already is not creating, but something that break out of the consciousness and fall into your lap at the moment that you didn't expect, and that's like a gift, I wouldn't say like a warning. It's like a gift that if you're fast enough or clever enough, then you can catch it. That's the moment. If I don't listen to that moment, my work would have been very different. But that moment, when you catch it, it becomes something a lot bigger and even more beautiful.